If there is one Game Boy game for which I can, with confidence, say that I've in fact beaten it countless times, that would be Wario Land 2, 6 golden coins. I got the game as a hand-me-down from a family friend, together with the original Game Boy. Since then, I've played the game so much that at some point I could beat it with my eyes closed. And you know what? It's been over a decade since the last time I beat the game, so why not dive back in and see how well it holds up? Am I blinded by nostalgia?
Yes, I am.
Now, biases aside, I've decided to talk about this game because I want to explain why I think Wario Land 2 is a great game. And even though it's primarily a Wario Land 2 video, I will sometimes draw comparisons between the first and second Wario Land titles. I'm not gonna go too deep into the first game and its story, as it basically just boils down to Tatanga conquers Wario Land and you need to save Princess Daisy. You know, classic Mario stuff. A lot of the same tropes we know from Super Mario Bros. 1 can be found. The screen only scrolls in one direction, and the classic "your princess is in another castle" is here in full force, for example. Super Mario Land 1 was a weird and short game. The sprites were tiny, and in my opinion, it's not graphically as enticing as the games on the NES or later even the Super Nintendo. But this new Mario Land title, that one seemed to be a little bit more like the Mario games we know from the consoles. Now, the main villain in Mario Land 1 was Tatanga, and while Mario was out there in Wario Land trying to rescue Daisy, a new villain, Wario, took control of Mario's private island and put a spell on its inhabitants, turning them hostile to Mario. Something that my manual refers to as "een böse Überraschung." Oh, and by the way, does this also include the Koopa Troopas and Goombas? I thought those were already hostile to Mario. Not to mention the Boos and Cheep Cheeps, but I digress. Mario comes back to his land and finds out that there's a squatter on his property. And now he has to collect 6 golden coins in order to yank open the new castle door that Wario installed. As a kid, I would just sit there and look at Wario running back and forth on top of the castle, wondering what he's up to in there. Mario should have brought a battering ram. Those seem to be working pretty well on castle gates. Canonically though, where does this story take place in the Mario timeline? I hear some say it's near the end, where there's others that say it's more in the middle. I always kinda treated the Mario Land games like they were more of their own thing, you know, that you could place pretty much anywhere. Since Super Mario World was released a year before this game started its development, the game follows a lot of design and control choices previously seen in that title. A major plus is that the game looks and feels more like a proper Mario game compared to Mario Land 1, which, in all fairness, was a bit lacking. Okay, from here on out I'll try to stop dunking on Mario Land 1, okay? I'm sorry. Now, our controls are still pretty standard. A does jump, B does dash. The spin jump we know and love from Super Mario World makes a return, but only works when you're Big Mario or Fire Mario. And due to the lack of action buttons, it can only be activated by pressing down on the D-pad when in the air. While spin jumping, you can break blocks and activate question mark blocks. Running and using spin jumps can look pretty cool, and it feels incredibly rewarding if you time these things right. You can also defeat some enemies in one stomp as opposed to 2 with the spin jump, which is pretty nifty. As with many Mario games, sprinting then jumping gives you longer jumps, and you can jump a little bit higher by pressing up and jumping. Mario can of course duck for cover, and weirdly enough, even Tiny Mario can duck down. Despite that looking funny, it doesn't really offer you anything useful though. The controls are responsive, but in terms of momentum, a seasoned Mario enjoyer will probably pick up on the fact that your movement is a tad bit more slippery, and your sprint jumps might not reach as far as you might expect them to. This can sometimes throw you off, something that has happened to me quite a few times. I don't see this as a big issue however, it just requires some muscle memory adjustments. Mario platformers tend to be pretty straightforward. You have your standard power-ups, like the mushroom and the fire flower. They are back. And no longer will we have super balls. Due to the limited colors on the Game Boy game, you will get a feather on your cap as to show that you have the fire flower power-up. In addition to being able to get rid of enemies this way, fireballs can also be used to break specific blocks. Now, a newcomer is the carrot, which gives you bunny ears. The bunny ears allow you to hover for quite some time while slowly descending, making you hop continuously and, check this, allow Mario to jump a bit higher than he would normally be able to. When used properly, you can skip over large parts of some levels. So if you don't feel like platforming too much, I can't really blame you for using this to your advantage. The star power-up makes a return, which, conveniently, doesn't bounce but just stays in place. With the star power-up, you turn invincible for a limited time, and once you start running through enemies, it will count the amount of hits. Everything over 4 will count as an extra life for Mario. Other than finding these scattered throughout the game, you can also get one after eliminating 100 enemies. See the counter at the bottom of the screen? It counts your kills. Stars are usually conveniently placed just before and around stretches of flat surfaces, so you can start running through enemies for a bit. If you time it just right, you might be able to extend the time limit, which allows you to run through a few more enemies and rake in more of those extra lives. Being able to spawn these things anywhere in the level might make you think, can I bring it into the boss room? But no, you can't, I tested it. In some areas they played around with different control schemes for what you could consider flying mechanics. Other than hovering around with the bunny ears, in the level leading up to Space Zone, there are hippos snoozing about, and you will be able to use their snot bubbles to fly around in the level. As long as you do not collide with enemies or the water, you can pretty much just fly to the end of the level. The spacesuit also kinda feels like the hippo snot bubble in terms of controls, so I'm guessing that introducing it in the level leading up to Space Zone was kind of a way to let you get used to its controls, as they are mostly similar. Levels can be ended by reaching the goal door, which is a pretty consistent theme in the Land series of Mario and later even Wario games. If you ring the bell before entering, you get a little bonus screen where you can play a crane game of some sorts and gain additional power-ups and extra lives. These can also be bought with coins in the casino cave in front of the castle. As a kid I always thought it was more of a hedge though. You can play the slot machines here to gain extra lives or power-ups. Coins are in abundance, so you will most likely have more than enough to spend here later if you're having trouble with some of the levels. Now something else that's pretty interesting is the fact that the game has an easy mode, which can be activated from the file selection screen. This mode changed some of the areas in the game to make them more easier to play through, by omitting some of the enemies and obstacles. I'm not too above admitting that as a kid I used this mode a lot because I found the game to be too difficult back then. But nowadays? I'm not quite sure if I could call the game difficult. I don't know if that's due to experience or just because the game is actually easy. Now as stated earlier, the main goal of the game is to collect the 6 golden coins and open up the castle gate. These coins are guarded by bosses of each zone, and you gotta defeat them. So yeah, Mario Land 2's world consists of a nice overworld reminiscent of Super Mario World, but this time it's with 6 zones. Zones are self-contained areas within Mario Land 2. They are pretty much the equivalent of worlds in other Mario titles. The zones can be found in all corners of the map, and the biggest difference between how it's done in this game versus other Mario titles is that you are free to choose which zone you want to start with. Each zone consists of an average of about 3 to 4 levels, including a boss stage. As for which zones the game has, the list goes as follows: Tree Zone, Macro Zone, Space Zone, Turtle Zone, Pumpkin Zone, and lastly, Mario Zone. Some levels in the game are also scattered around the overworld, and some of them are visible on the map without a clear path to reach them. More on that later. A lot of blocks in the game also have eyes, echoing more of that Super Mario World design. The game's levels are varied, something I really appreciate. One of the things it does incredibly well is its presentation. Despite the limited colors, I love how each zone, even though they're not very large, has its own thematic levels that mostly fits the zone's vibes. The sprites are great and a big step up from Mario Land 1. The background design is also incredible, giving a sense of scale in the world of Mario Land 2. And it's not just the look of the areas themselves that fit the theme, the zones are also filled with a wide variety of enemies to populate them. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about some of these enemies. Some of them are pretty weird. Other than your standard Goombas and Koopa Troopas, depending on which zone you're in, you will also have zone-specific enemies. Look at this goatfish thing. Where does this one fit? In Macro Zone, you're shrunken down, and thus you will encounter ants and bugs. These come in a few varieties, one of which has a gun on its head. Weird. Some enemies will show up only in one level and then never again, such as this gnome, which will then proceed to yoink your one up and run away, until you catch him that is. Others, like these pigs that can shoot cannonballs, will show up in a few different levels in different zones, making them more of a recurrent enemy. Now the Pumpkin Zone definitely has the widest variety of enemies. From Goombas with Jason Voorhees masks, to a vampire which will endlessly spawn bats, and only shows up once in this very specific spot. Or what about the flying lizard tails, and of course the occasional boo. One of the things that stood out especially in this zone is this one level which is full of Japanese yokai characters. I was able to identify a few of them, such as the umbrella one, the lantern one, and the cyclops. As a kid I thought they were just weird monsters, as we don't typically have those characters portrayed here. But the fact that the zone is a pumpkin, with levels that have flying brooms and witches for enemies, makes this an interesting mashup of Eastern/Western spooky aesthetics. And it's not completely new, as they already did a bit of adding folklore and cultural elements in Mario Land 1, such as the Sphinxes, Easter Island faces, and also the Jiangshi, which are these hopping vampires. Another enemy which stood out to me as a kid was this fly creature that I could just never catch, even though I really tried to. The developers knew what they were up to when making these. Despite the developers' efforts, you can kill them with a fire flower though. Continuing with the variety this game adds, the bosses look very distinct and add to the zone's design choices. Examples like a big bird on top of a tree, octopus in the turtle zone, and a witch in the pumpkin zone nicely adds to the theme of those zones. Most of these will require 3 hits to kill, after which you will be rewarded with a golden coin, like the game title mentions. These 6 golden coins will be dropped in the slots surrounding the castle gate. One of the bosses that in my opinion stands out the most is the one in Mario Zone, these 3 little piggies. Yet another example of the designers basing their design off of something folklore related. Out of all bosses, they take most hits to beat, as you have to hit each piggy 3 times for a total of 9 hits. That's 3 times as much as the other bosses, so they could be a little challenging. Other than that, if you know what you're doing, most bosses go down pretty easily. Though in my opinion, they're still pretty fun to beat. Levels contain little secrets which you're encouraged to find by nudging you into specific directions with little hints. Coin arrows, cloud arrows, or even pathways only Tiny Mario can fit through are visual hints to the player that there's something to be found there. In some cases, this means having to sacrifice something, like having to shrink down to Small Mario, or having to come back to this level with the appropriate power-up in order to progress. In some cases, these pathways can even lead to alternate exits, yet another nod to what Super Mario World did right. Now, level design-wise, sometimes they feel a little random, but nevertheless very creative. For a Game Boy game, they did try to pack it with a lot of different ideas, and I'm sure the developers had a lot of fun designing the levels the way they did. Now, I shouldn't forget the game's soundtrack, composed by Kazumi Totaka, who would go on to work on many future Nintendo titles. Some notable ones include Link's Awakening, Yoshi's Story, Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, and Pikmin 2, all of which have that famous Easter egg, Totaka song. As for Wario Land 2, I still find myself humming the athletic theme every so often. I think it's very catchy, and it's cool to hear the same leitmotif returning in many of the other tracks, giving the game its own distinct and recognizable musical theme. Eight-Bit Music Theory made a great video where he went over how and why these tracks work so well. I suggest watching his video after this one, if you haven't already seen it at this point. Also, the boss track is designed in such a way that it really stressed me out as a kid. Just listen to the start of this. It has such a brass tone, really nailing that uh-oh, boss fight vibe. Now, spoiler alert, if you care at least, after beating all the bosses and collecting the 6 golden coins, you get to enter the final stage, Wario's Castle. And oh boy, this is really a level worthy of the title Final Stage. There are a lot of tricky platforming sections, traps and other obstacles trying to slow you down and chip away at your power-ups. And to make things even more challenging, no checkpoints. So if you screw up, too bad, it's back to the beginning, and you will have to play the entire stage all over again. Now I know I already mentioned some of the weirder enemies in the game, but now, near the end of this level, you encounter these weird, odd-looking ball things, that for some reason have Wario's face on them. What the hell are they? If you're a little bit proficient with spin jumping and avoiding them, you can get rid of them pretty easily. They seem to serve as some sort of final obstacle before you encounter Wario. You gotta deal with a total of 5 of them before you can finally enter the throne room and deal with that annoying squatter. Speaking of which... Oh god, there we go, the real deal. And my lord, if there was one final boss that gave me goosebumps back in the day, that would be Wario. Once you're here, you can smell the end of the game. You're so close! And Wario looks pretty menacing. He has a large sprite and his facial features are pretty exaggerated. He will continuously dash back and forth in the throne room, occasionally ground pounding, stunning Mario in place. And when he does this, it will drop the light fixtures, adding additional vertical projectiles to dodge. After defeating phase 1 of Wario, you chase him into the next room, where he will use a familiar power-up, the carrot. He will then proceed to use it against you. He once again takes 3 hits to defeat, and now it's time for the final phase, Fire Flower Wario, which has an incredibly foreboding introduction. We repeat the process, dunking on his head again. That makes a total of 9 hits, by the way, same as those little piggies. And we've done it! Look at that! Wario seemingly can take the L and acts incredibly petty, after which he just evicts himself. But wait, why did Mario jump off the castle too? And that's it! You did it! You saved Wario Land 2! What an interesting game. I wonder if Nintendo will ever make Wario the villain again in the future. Probably not though, they play things pretty safe nowadays. Now that the main objective is done, you don't have to be. You could say the game has a little side objective, which is completing all mandatory and optional levels. You don't really get anything for it though, but it's fun to explore and figure out how to get to those secret level dots you can see on the map. If you complete these levels, the background in some of the zones will change. Man, this game is full of charm. All stages can be played infinitely, a la Super Mario World style, but if you like the boss stages, tough luck. Unless you get a game over, which returns all the collected boss coins back to the bosses. But other than Little Zenter, who would get a game over in this game? Wouldn't be you, right? The game is not super long, most people can beat the game to completion in about 3 hours. As for myself, my fastest time I think I got was an hour or so? Speedrunners can do it in roughly 38 minutes however, which is pretty much cutting my personal best in half. Wanna challenge yourself? See how fast you can beat the game. And you can flex your best time in the comments if you want. Now if you're like, wow, I really want to try this game out, there's a few options to do so. If you're able to get one of the cartridges, you can play it on any of the Game Boys, except for the Game Boy Micro. Another option is the Virtual Console for the Nintendo 3DS. However, your success rate may vary, as you can no longer purchase it from the eShop. Which leaves us with the Nintendo Switch Online version, which is the easiest accessible way to play the game legally nowadays. So, conclusion? Mario Land 2 is by far one of the best platformers on the original Game Boy, and it absolutely improved on its predecessor. Together with the Wario Land games, I believe these games showcase just how good platformers could actually be on the Game Boy. There were a lot of odd and interesting design choices made for this game, but it all adds to its unique charm. Personally, it's not my all-time favorite Mario platformer, but it's pretty high up there. And the other main takeaway? The game gave us Wario, and subsequently, the Wario Land games. That alone should be reason enough to like it if you ask me. But yeah, I'm curious. What do you people think of Super Mario Land 2? Did you play it? Is it as good as I make it out to be? Or not? Maybe you absolutely hated it? Let me know in the comments down below. My name is Enter, and I have some errands to attend to. Bye! These 6 golden coins will be dropped in the 6 golden slots.